Hi guys, this is part 2 of our analysis of The Godfather Part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, please go back and check it out. Also, please excuse any poor audio on my behalf. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
Right. So let's finish The Godfather. We've been talking a while now. So let's finish The Godfather. So I need to bring up Robert De Niro. I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a huge fan of his performance. I know he's meant to be one of the greatest actors of all time, but my most critical note of the movie is I assume De Niro did not speak a lick of Italian at all. I do not believe he could speak Italian. I reckon he learned his lines phonetically. I do not think for a minute that man is from Sicily. Not for a minute. You know, there are so many scenes where De Niro is just sort of stood there nodding along to people talking Italian at him. And he just makes the De Niro face, the upside down smile, as you say. Yeah. But he just does that, and then they move on. And it's like, he didn't know his lines that day. He didn't know how to say it in Italian that day. He hadn't learnt enough yet. And I just felt there were so many of these scenes where De Niro clearly can't speak Italian. And that broke the movie a little bit for me. That's my biggest problem with the movie. De Niro isn't. De Niro is not great for me in this movie.
Yeah, I think they can probably get around that by saying that when he was a boy, he was very quiet, and then he grew up kind of in America.
Well, this is it, and it is that way in the book as well. I hear, because I've moaned about this to my dad, and he's like, "Well, that's basically his character anyway. He's not very wordy." And I'm like, right, but by the time he's a Don, you can't shut the man up. So what you see Brando being, that's not a man who struggles to find words, not at all. And he's speaking English. That's not even a native. He's not even a native English speaker. Don't tell me he's more comfortable speaking English. I don't believe that for a minute. He'd be way more comfortable speaking Italian. But he does not look comfortable speaking Italian. The only scene De Niro looks comfortable to me in is when the guy comes in finding out that De Niro is like a criminal, and he's like, "Oh, they can have free rent, or whatever that scene was, where he talks to someone."
I wanted to bring up this scene.
It's literally the only scene that I think De Niro looks like he's comfortable. The whole movie, he looks like he's holding on to a shit or something. And then this one scene, it's like he finally let it all out, and he's like, now I can be De Niro for 5 minutes, and then he's gone. But yeah, what did you want to talk about this scene about?
So I was thinking, doesn't it feel quite European to you, this scene? It feels very different than much of the film. It feels like you could have taken that from Italian cinema or something from Europe, just the way, especially the way that the landlord acts, and the fact obviously it's not in English, but and the way the scenery looks, it just feels very different to me. And I'm wondering if Francis Ford Coppola was inspired a bit by European film and cinematography when he made that, because it feels, especially.
I think I think that's like intentional, isn't it? I think because that's like a sort of callback to the period. So and also because obviously this part of New York is just Italian immigrants. So it's basically, a new Italy, and they, it does feel very European. You're right. It feels very, very like bicycle thieves kind of Italian. So yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Good scene. I think it's the best performance from De Niro in the movie, besides him getting his revenge on his daddy's killer.
Do you think that maybe De Niro in The Godfather Part 2 is piggybacking a little bit on Marlon Brando's fame that he'd built up a little bit?
I mean, what, De Niro's career is owed to Brando? Is Is that what it's called? Just this movie.
That sounds very harsh when you put
I know, because I was about to end the call. I was about to cancel the podcast.
No, but
sorry, listeners.
Do you get what I mean? Like in the film, that why people might think it's very cool.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I think Brando is brilliant in the first one, and I think this film really misses him. I really felt that this film, it felt like there was a Brando-shaped hole in the whole movie. There's a scene at the end, isn't there? A flashback where Michael tells them that he's going to war instead of going to college. And they're really not happy. Like James Caan is like fuming, and he's like, "You've ruined your dad's day." And then they hear Marlon Brando come in, but he doesn't actually come in.
Yeah.
So what happened there? Why didn't he appear?
I actually can't remember the reason, but he couldn't make it for some reason. He was actually supposed to be there, and then it just changed the scene that he's just like, "Oh, he's coming through the door," or whatever, and then
probably didn't have any wheelchair access. He got big by then, I'm sure. Very big.
I think when he got really big was in the 90s. I think at this point he was still.
Nah, yeah, dude, Apocalypse Now. He's like an elephant. They literally had to put him in darkness his whole scene because he was like, "Don't let them know I'm fat. Don't show my fat to everyone." So they filmed him in the dark because that's the only solution. It's like, well, there's a lot of you to film around Brando, so like, all right, just a black room with just darkness, nothing. Like, yeah, mental. Yeah, no, I'm sure he was big at this point. He's not thin in the first Godfather.
Yeah, but it's only like a year or two difference, I think, between the first two films. But I think Apocalypse Now, I think, is it in the 80s they filmed that, or was it late 70s?
I thought it was 70s, like 77 or something. I thought
maybe. So I think there's more time for him to have put on the weight. Well, a year or two probably would. Maybe he could have put on a bit of weight, but not to the extent that he was later to become.
So we've talked about a lot of shit, but we haven't talked about the court case.
Yeah, you know what? I got a bit annoyed about this because I was really searching my mind. Was this ever mentioned before it happened?
I did not notice if it did. It's like this court case comes out of nowhere after the intermission.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? When did this happen? Yeah, it just sort of comes out of nowhere.
You would expect that, like, at some point early on, there will be like something. Oh, Michael, you need to go to this or something, whatever, you know. But no, I really don't. I was watching it with my daughter, and every so often she was distracting me, as was my wife. But if you don't remember anything, I'm pretty sure probably there was absolutely nothing to.
Willie, you have to understand. I streamed this film. I didn't have it on DVD, so I streamed it, and the Italian subtitles were not as extensive as I wanted them to be. I will say at this point in the film, like we find out about the miscarriage, and then we also have because there's a link, isn't there? Like towards the end of Michael's story and towards the end of Vito's story at this point in the film, he finds out about a miscarriage and Vito James Caan is born. So you have this this sort of thematic link between the past and present, but they're completely different. Where Vito, it's like his sort of coming up, whereas Pacino, it's like his descent into being more ruthless and more angry and, a darker Don.
Do you know a bit about this period in mafia times, shall we say?
I mean, not as much as I would need to know.
So I know that Hyman Roth is based on a gangster called Meyer Lansky. And Meyer Lansky was like one of the biggest mafia guys. He was a very clever guy. He was a Jewish gangster, and he was always in the gambling, but he never gambled himself. He was always just setting up the casinos. And actually kind of bugs me that he's a bad guy in this movie because I think he's quite cool. He was one of the smartest gangsters because he was only one of the few that managed to outlive everybody else. Everyone got either arrested or they died in prison or murdered or something. Lansky managed to live his whole life, never went to prison. I think he made even, I'm not sure if he managed to get into Israel or not. because I think he wanted to return there. Because I know that I think in Godfather Part 2, he's not allowed to return to Israel because he's a gangster.
Well, this sounds exactly like Roth. So
yeah.
I can
He's
see how
based on
this is
him.
based on him. Yeah.
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 And so,
sounds just like him.
yeah. And the other guy I always think about, one of the most legendary gangsters, was Lucky Luciano.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I was going to say that maybe Michael's a little bit based on him, but it's not the case because Luciano was an older guy, I think, and he was more from the ground up. He may have even been born in it. No, I think he was born in Italy and he was sent back there. But so those two basically, and they were close friends. And you had like Luciano was in like the Italian mafia, and you had Meyer Lansky, who was more on the side because he was Jewish. He wasn't really involved in like the Italian mafia, but he was still very respected in control of the gambling. And at some point in this time, which I think Michael's story is based on, so because like in the Godfather, the first film, you have local families. You have New York divided into 5 families, and you have Michael killing everybody and taking control of all of New York, then relocating to California, Lake Tahoe, and having an international mafia, like not international exactly, like a national mafia controlling all of the crime in America. And that's what really happened with like Luciano as well. Like they somehow managed to join all of the families in America, and it was like this kind of, as some people say, it never existed, was this kind of like national syndicate where they kind of like controlled all of the crime. So I think that there was some like that was the influence of the Godfather Part 2, is when he had this national crime syndicate. Yeah.
Well, that is what he's pushing for. Like that, this Cuba deal would really push the Corleones to like the forefront of like, you know, the American gambling. They'd have their gambling syndicate in the States, and then they've got their gambling syndicate in South America, and boom, you know, now they've monopolized American gambling. You know, it is, he had eyes very big.
Yeah, and also with that is what that was also a real thing that happened as well. In Cuba, before the revolution, they had a lot of American gangsters just like setting up operations over there. And like as Hyman Roth explains, like finally we have a friendly government that is open to cooperation, all this and blah 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 blah. And that was really the case. They had so many gangsters there until like the revolution, and they just got all kicked out and they lost everything. So some of them invested huge amounts of money.
Well, this is it. I think this is why Pacino finally confronts Roth. We'll get into the court case in a second, but I think we've hit on something here. I do think this is why Pacino chooses to confront Roth when he does, and why he hadn't confronted him beforehand, because it's like we know that he knew that Roth was setting him up, but he still wanted this deal to go through. But now he sees like the rebels literally throwing, you know, sacrificing their own lives to like just take out one police officer or one militaryman in like a coup or whatever's going on there. Like the it just like it's a sharp like Pacino's like, right, this deal, even if it went through, isn't going to yield profit, so I'm not giving my money, and too much risk, and I need to kill the guy anyway because he's been playing me since the get-go.
I kind of see it a little bit differently. I think that, so although Michael does seem like he seems to say numerous times, yeah, it's Roth is trying to kill me, blah, blah, blah. I think that he's still, maybe I was wrong when I said earlier about the evidence thing. Maybe he is trying to look for a solid piece of evidence that says, because maybe that was also the case with Michael, because sorry, not Michael, Fredo, because I think he's a bit, it takes him a bit of evidence here and there until finally they're in Cuba, and he says that thing about Johnny Ola, and then okay, now I 100% know. I think that maybe he keeps testing Roth until eventually he might say something. And I think it's when he talks about that guy, Mo Green, and when he was murdered, he's like, okay, now I know definitely you want me to kill me because I killed your friend. He died in the first film.
I mean, look, it's just business. It's just business. I mean, yeah, look, I get that. but like, yeah, for me, in the moment, I was struggling to follow, but in hindsight, I do think it's just an extension. The confusion is an extension of Michael's paranoia.
Yeah.
I was very confused a lot, and I think that it's very intentional to make us confused. The problem is when you really start to unpack it, like when you find out that Roth set up everything, it's sort of like, yeah, but how did he set up everything? Like
Yeah.
then you just end up with more questions, and there's no satisfying answer to it. It's just an oversight in the writing, which is sometimes a little bit difficult. But yeah.
Yeah, when I see that in other shows that and films, that bothers me. Like, no, you can't plan that much.
Yeah.
I think The Godfather gets away with it a little bit. When I see that in other shows, I'm like, I'm not going to give you that. That's just too stupid. For example, do you ever watch Peaky Blinders? Especially, for example, the season with Adrian Brody in it. Which, by the way, I recently saw on Facebook someone saying, "Oh, this was the best character. This was the best season." But for me, it was the stupidest season, and it was just completely ridiculous because at the end of this season, the main character, Tommy, I think his name is, has lost everything. His two brothers are dead. He's at gunpoint. He's going to be killed. It's like, aha, but you didn't know this or that or this, and then this and this, and all these reveals, all these twists. And then his brother isn't dead, and he comes out from the other side, and then they kill him, and then everything's okay. And it's like, I think the writers just wrote themselves into a hole. Like, oh, fuck, how do we get out of this? And then, like, yeah, I cannot forgive that. Like, I was like giving it a chance. Like, come on, show me that you improve over the few seasons, and it just got stupid. And I was like, okay. I think when you have a film like The Godfather, which, by the way, is like, what? How old is it now? 50 something?
Yeah, about 50 years.
Yeah, you can give it a bit of a pass, but when they're still doing it today, it's like, no, I just can't do it. For me, I find it too stupid.
Yeah. I'm with you, really. I'm with you.
Yeah, maybe with The Godfather Part 2. So there are things that we both find a bit funny. It's still a great film.
Great film, bit jarring in places.
Yeah, but you have to remember, maybe at the time, those
not
things
jarring at all.
Yeah, it was like super impressive.
Absolutely.
We're looking at it from a perspective of half a century later.
Exactly. I made this point earlier. Yeah, like I think it's unfair sometimes to judge a film that sort of just isn't culturally sort of relevant anymore. But at the time was one of the most important movies to watch. Anyone growing up in the 70s, The Godfather was a defining film of their life. And I feel like sometimes it's unfair to judge older films through like a modern lens. Let's wrap up Godfather. So let's get it done. The court case. I really like the court case, but it just comes out of nowhere. And that guy, the first guy who's grassing up the Corleones, I have no idea who he is. Fancini, I think his name was.
Rocco Chichi or something like that. Yeah,
but he's like, I got my orders from the top, and there were buffers, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, I don't feel like we'd seen him at all.
No, he was there. He was there. You just didn't recognize him. He was with Frank Pentangeli from the very beginning. He's there, but he doesn't have any lines.
Right.
Yeah, and then when Frank is being assassinated, well, they're pretending to assassinate him, whatever you want to call that scene. He's also there, and I think he gets hit by a car towards the end of it. So yeah, and then I think at that point they're both brought in by the FBI or whoever is investigating them, and they become witnesses because they think that Michael tried to get them killed, basically.
I love how Michael handles Pentangeli without a single word.
Yeah.
Like, it is just done so perfectly. for me, it's one of these things like when I say at the beginning that they spell out the backstory and it's so unnecessary. Right here, we have a scene where it's like you just have to read people's faces to figure out what's going on, and it's great. It's great. I mean, I feel like once they do explain it later, but in the moment, it's so well done because then they say, "Yeah, this is his brother," and they're like, "Right." So like a couple of things are going on in my head. I was thinking maybe it's a threat that they'll kill his brother, or we find out that the brother is also like old school mafia. So going to the police is like the worst thing you can do. Like you'll be dead to me if you went to the police.
Yeah, I think it's
do
the second
anything
one.
except go to the police. Yeah, no, it's definitely the second one. They confirm it in a different scene, but in the moment, I had both of these sort of floating around my head, and like it just didn't matter. It was just all the looks on people's faces, and it just told the whole story, and it was so well done. Like great acting in this scene. Great acting. Even the brother who doesn't even have a line of dialogue, his face it says 1,000 words. It's brilliant. He looks so sad.
Yeah, you know that he almost they were both. I think they were both nominated an Oscar. The actor who played Frank Pentangeli and Robert De Niro, but Robert De Niro won. Both nominated for the same film.
Did De Niro win it for this?
He won something. I'm not sure if it was an Oscar or an what. I don't even know how you clarify these awards.
You know, I don't really. I'll have to look this up because I don't think he deserves an Oscar for this performance. I think he deserves an Oscar for convincing people that he could speak Italian, even though it's obvious he can't speak Italian.
I've just looked at it now. He won Best Supporting Actor
at the Academy Awards.
The 47th Academy Awards, yeah. Best Supporting Actor. He won that.
So De Niro won for this movie.
Yeah, and there was two other actors that were nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Michael V. Gazio, which I believe played Pentangeli, and Lee Strasberg was also nominated. I'm kind of surprised he was nominated. I think he has quite a small role.
I think Pentangeli is brilliant as a character and as a great performance. I'm very. I mean, look, that feels like a bit of a. I don't know that. But I feel that De Niro is overrated in this movie, but maybe I'm just seeing, maybe I'm missing something. Like maybe I'm just not getting it. But like I felt like it's really obvious the man can't speak Italian, even when he speaks fluent Italian, even when his Italian is amazing and he is speaking. Like the times he isn't speaking, it's so obvious he has no idea what people around him are saying. It's so obvious. Like he just looks so gormless in some scenes. Like, oh, but perhaps that is, an intentional, performance trait that they chose upon. But like for me, it doesn't work. So, but maybe I'm alone. Clearly, the Academy doesn't agree with me.
So, yeah, but come on, to be honest, with these awards, they don't always go to the people they really should go to. So
true. Do we need to discuss the ending?
Go on, let's do it then.
Right. So pretty much all I've got written down is Pacino's face is terrifying when he finds out that Diane Keaton got an abortion instead of a miscarriage. Brilliant scene. Pacino is amazing in that scene. Oh, by the way, when I say this about De Niro, that I don't like the performance, I actually do really like the flashbacks. Like they were my favorite parts of the film. I really enjoyed the flashbacks.
When I'm watching The Godfather Part 2, then come on, let's go back to the early days.
I like the Vito stuff. And I love Vito getting his revenge at the end, although I wasn't 100% satisfied because the guy was like all senile. And it's like, oh, you want him to really feel the weight of this. Like, this is Antonio Antoli or whatever his name is. What is his name? My father was Antonio Antoli, you mofo. Here's a knife to the gut. And it's like, oh, I wish he wasn't senile, so De Niro could have enjoyed it more.
Yeah, that would have been a bit nicer. A nicer revenge.
Now, towards the end of the film, I'm sort of like on a toss-up. Like, is Pacino going to kill Fredo? He promises that he says, like, don't kill Fredo until my mum dies. But then Adrian from Rocky begs him, and then he comes out on at mum's funeral, and they hug, and then he starts letting him have a relationship with his son. Like I if anything, I thought it was strange that he allowed him back into his son's life, only to just kill him. Like that I actually thought didn't ring true to his character. I just thought he was going to kill him. You know, the moment the mum dies, right, dead, boom. Which is pretty much what happens. But I like how, like that, the ending, he kills like 3 people back to back. You know, he gets Ross, Frankie gets kills himself, and Fredo. You know, just 3 guys that have been the thorn in his side the whole movie. Just boom, all 3 of them get taken out within a minute.
He's very patient.
Well, this really. He waited, and he bought his time. And I really like this scene when Frankie comes out of prison and Robert Duvall picks him up, and I'm thinking, oh, is Robert Duvall going to help him? And it's like, no, he already knows that being a grass is the worst thing you can do in the mafia. So if you kill yourself, okay, we'll look after your family. And then boom, like, oh yeah, I love this scene with him and Robert Duvall. I thought it was great, really well done. And so we see all these guys die within a minute, like the final minute of the film. And then the film finishes on a flashback that we were talking about earlier when Brando was meant to be there. But we have this flashback of Michael revealing to everyone, I've dropped out of college. I'm going to go fight, and I'm choosing war over, education. And I thought thematically it's really quite good that, like, killing the death of these 3 guys, and we just see Michael looking out on the water. It's like the transformation is complete. And then we get the flashback just to remind you, like, he had goals, he had dreams larger than the family, and now he's even worse than his father, more ruthless, more paranoid, more angry,
more powerful as well.
More powerful and willing to take out family. And although I'm pretty sure Brando doesn't do family, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, he's more ruthless. And I honestly, by the end of the second film, I was like, you know what? I think I should watch the third one, but maybe I shouldn't, because I hear it's terrible.
It's not terrible. It is good. It's just quite different to the previous 2. And it feels a bit like how you were saying with like The Godfather Part 2. Does it really have a purpose? This one also feels a bit the same. The Godfather 3, like, why do we need to have this film? It just seems a bit unnecessary. We already know, we already can see where this is going, and it just follows that, basically. What is interesting though about the third one is that, after this, you kind of see how, well, Pacino matures and changes as an actor, and that then obviously gets brought into The Godfather Part 3, and his personality as Michael, it really is like Al Pacino's character, I guess. He seems different. He seems less calculating, a bit more Pacino-y, shall we say.
Right. He's a bit more hooah and a little bit less Corleone.
Yeah, I think a little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the problem with Pacino and De Niro and a lot of these actors from a different era, is that they sort of become a little bit larger than life. And it becomes like the performance plays them.
Yeah.
Nowadays. Like, what's his name? Christopher Walken, I think, is a great example. Where if you watch Deer Hunter, he is giving a great performance. You watch him in any movie in the last 20 years, and it's just the same weird Christopher Walken thing he does, which is great. It's really endearing and fun to watch, but like it never changes.
You know who he's going to be in the film.
Yeah, the moment you cast Christopher Walken, you know what character he is, and you know the kind of guy he is, and and I feel like the same with Pacino. It's very like, you know what you get with Pacino nowadays. I feel like a lot of these guys get typecast now.
I kind of feel that they don't mind that. I think
they've made a career out of it.
Yeah.
They love it. They love it. Look at De Niro. He couldn't get enough of it. He couldn't get enough of that money. That what's it? Grumpy Grandad or whatever that terrible movie is with him and Zac Efron. Like he's loving all of this dirty granddad money. He's loving it. He's like, yeah, let's make another Meet the Parents. Fuck it, why not? Like, he don't give a shit. He's basically ruined his credibility in Hollywood, and it hasn't actually affected his credibility in Hollywood at all. Yeah, it's mental.
I think he's one of few people that's immune to that.
Yeah, like I don't even think Pacino is immune to it. I think Pacino, when because we were hearing recently that like he was cast in something and then they had to recast because he couldn't remember any of his lines.
Really?
So like, yeah, I heard something like that. I could be wrong though. Maybe it was a film he was in and it was just a problem. But yeah, he couldn't remember any of his lines, and it was becoming such an issue that it was like, do we really need Al Pacino in this film? And it's like, well, what kind of director has ever said that? Like, do we need Al Pacino in this? Like, I feel every film is vastly improved with the inclusion of Al Pacino, usually. But, I mean, look, he's a great actor, but yeah, he's become a bit of a caricature of himself. The same as De Niro, the same as Christopher Walken, and there's so many more. So many more. And I think like there's very, I mean, you look at Matthew McConaughey, I really feel like he was a caricature of himself. And then he was like, you know what, man, I'm just going to say, fuck that. I'm going to be a good actor now. And he just decided to turn it on. He's like, right, I'm good all of a sudden. And he is. He's brilliant. I love Matthew McConaughey. I'm so glad that he proved the world wrong, that he isn't just a pretty face. He is a bloody great actor. Yeah. All right. Well, do we have any final thoughts on Godfather Part 2? Is it better than Godfather Part 1?
No. Well, I think that The Godfather is Francis Ford Coppola looking back at films from the period where it's set in the late 1940s and 50s, thinking, how could I do that and make it really realistic and really like the best it could possibly be? And I think that he pulls that off quite well with The Godfather. And like, it is kind of experimental in the sense that like he's pushing for super detail. He's being very, very pedantic and making it like this. He wants to make the perfect film, and you get that and you see that. Like, he's basically trying to take what we already know and love about films like this, gangster films, and make it the best it can possibly be. And he succeeds. While The Godfather 2, I think, is him experimenting more a bit with narrative when you have Vito's story, and then kind of taking it a step further. But it is a little bit too much in some places. Like we were saying, for example, some of the stuff at the beginning, maybe we didn't really need. But there's also parts throughout the film like that. And there are some narrative problems that maybe they come from the fact that it's adapted from a book. That you don't see many films in that kind of way. For example, suddenly we have the courtroom scene out of nowhere, never been mentioned. And also, funny enough, you also have it kind of replicating itself, don't you? So in the first film, starts in a wedding. Second film starts at I guess it's a celebration of Antony's. Yeah, I think it's a communion even for joining.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, it's baptism and stuff.
Yeah. And at the end of the first film, you have the heads of the 5 families being executed. And at the end of the second film, you have all of Michael's enemies being executed. So it's kind of like maybe that's probably why there was a 20-year gap between the second and third, because if you did that a third time so recently, it's like, okay, we get like it's kind of coming a bit too.
Cracks are showing,
thing. Yeah. So yeah, I get what you're saying about. I mean, was it really necessary to have? I think that in some ways it broke further ground that the rest of Hollywood then took on, and it raised the bar in terms of how films are made and the standards that they adhere to. But looking at it now, today, there are some things that we in the 2020s kind of think, we've had 50 years of film since then, so things have changed a lot. People have tried different things and they've improved the little things, and different things have become the standard. So our way of looking at it, of course, we're going to see the holes. So it's an excellent film.
It is very good.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that's my conclusion of The Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, I think that's pretty adequate. That's pretty adequate. I mean, look, for me, it was a great film. It was a long Italian speaking great film. It wasn't difficult to watch at all. No, look, I mean, for me, it was a little bit long, but it was bloody brilliant. And I didn't find myself getting bored. I watched it in one sitting. I had one cigarette break and that was it. And I watched the whole thing. I actually went for my cigarette break like 30 seconds before the interval came up. I didn't know there was an interval. If I'd known, I would have waited for it. So like I paused it, went for a cigarette, and then 30 seconds later, the interval came up. I was like, okay. But after the intermission, that court scene comes out of nowhere. Now I found that really quite jarring. There was a lot about the movie I found jarring, but perhaps
just reminds you how old it is that it has an intermission.
Yes. But I do think the reason why I find it jarring, the big reason why I find it jarring, is the buzz around this movie, the hype around this movie, and I don't think the movie lives up to the hype. I think the first one does. The first one is very obviously a brilliant movie. So bloody good. I'm really sort of caught between a rock and a hard place because I really like the movie, but it's nowhere near as good as the first. Like I don't understand why it's put on the same pedestal as the first one. Most sequels of that standard, I would think, would just be like, oh, it's good. It's just the second one. Most films are like that. If they make a second one, it's like, well, it's never as good as the first. Doesn't always pan out that way, but I don't think The Godfather is an example of a sequel surpassing the original. Personally, I think the original is far better, far more interesting. The characters are great, and like there's two other characters that are great in the movie that you totally miss out on in the second one, which is devastating. I really miss James Caan and I really miss Brando.
He died not long ago as well.
Oh yeah, I'd heard. Oh, very sad. But yeah, all right. I think that's it. That's a podcast. We did it, man.
We did 2 hours.
2 hours, man. But thank you all for coming along this journey with us. Craig, do you have anything to say to the people at home?
We love you. Thank you.
We do.
Listen to more, please.
Thanks for listening, Mum. That you brought the numbers up. Thank you. I think both of our mums will be our audience for the first few episodes.
It was very good. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Very nice.
I couldn't listen to it for longer than 10 minutes, but it was very good, guys. Well done. All right. Well, look, I don't even know what kind of an outro we would even do. I mean, should we give it a rate?
Make one up.
Should we rate it? Give The Godfather 2 an out of 10. How many Pacinos out of 7? How many Pacinos out of 7 Pacinos do you give it?
If we're saying The Godfather is an excellent film, a very good film, I would say it's a 10. The Godfather 2, Maybe if it's not a 10, it's at least a 9. I'm still putting it very high because it's still a remarkable film that people have to watch.
We're not doing a 1 to 10 rating system. We're doing it out of 7 Pacinos. How many Pacino? 7 Pacinos.
7 Pacinos.
Yeah. How many Pacinos do you give it? I give it like 5.75 Pacinos out of 7.
I probably give it at least 6.5 Pacinos, to be honest.
6.5 Pacinos.
Yeah.
I mean, because obviously the first one for me is a 6.9 Pacino, because you don't really want a 7 Pacino movie, because then it's not 69. 69 is like that's the perfect one. That's the true rating system. So the first one is 6.9 Pacinos. This one, I think it's a 5.73. Unfortunately, but it's still an incredible film. If it was a 1 to 10 system, I would put it at a 9 too. It's bloody brilliant, but it's not as good as the first by a noticeable margin.
Yeah,
that's my penny's worth. I really don't get why people consider it better, but it is bloody good.
Yeah, I think part of the reason you like The Godfather, the first one, more than the second is probably because of narrative, right? Is it because I think that Godfather was very self-contained, and like it had a beginning, middle, and end, and it made sense. It followed a very nice narrative.
The first one was long, but it was tight, and I think this one is tight too, but it's spread further out. But
and it depends on the first one as well. You need to watch the first to really get everything.
Absolutely. So I think the first one is a very, very good film, but it also has characters in it that I really love, and it's difficult when they're not around in the second one. Even though I don't think it was a necessary film, I'm glad it was made. I think we're both trying to be more critical of it than we need to be, just because we're trying to do the pod. But I think I was very surprised that it didn't blow me away like the first one did. I was expecting to be blown away. Perhaps that is why it was, maybe that's why it didn't impact me as much. I was expecting to be impacted. And I was watching it with a pen and piece of paper in my hand, writing notes. So, maybe I didn't watch it in the best way. Maybe I should have just sat back and experienced the film. Maybe I would have felt differently. But I don't think so. I feel like the way I watched the film, I was very observant and I was taking in as much as I could, and I was still missing stuff. I was still like, where did the court scene come from? And there's a few things where I'm like, did I miss something? Like, and I just think it's the film. Like and maybe if you do miss something, you can't be too heavily judged for it, because it is a bloody long film. It is bloody long. I could watch 3 movies in the time it takes you to watch one Godfather film. So let's say goodbye. Let's get this done. Again. So, guys, thanks for listening. Hope to see you again on the second pod. Craig, thank you for coming out to have some fun with me. Thank you for showing me a very good movie. I'm very happy.
Welcome.
Yeah, it was about bloody time. And next week, I will show you something.